saying hello, aloha. While you're all coming in, I want to introduce myself. My name is Claudia Thompson. I am the head of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel for BNI US. I'm also the managing launch director or senior launch coach in the core regions up in the Northeast. So I cover Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. So thank you all so much for being with us again for this month's DEI Talk. It is the first one of the year. We're really excited. And I am super excited about our panelists today, about the topic. These are folks that I love, that are near and dear to me. They are fellow panelists on the DEI panel. I'm going to quickly introduce each of them, and then Rachel is going to take over. So first, I'd like to introduce Brooke Shirley. Brooke is out of Cincinnati. Hopefully, I don't want to get the wrong Ohio city.
That's right.
I'm a Michigan fan. Shout out. I'm a Michigan fan, Ohioans. Anyway, sorry, I like to cause trouble if anyone ever has come on these calls. I'm a New Yorker. I disrupt Boston all the time where I live. It's okay. So Brooke is here. She's on the panel, and she's part of the Launch, Fill, and Retain committee that we have on the DEI panel. And actually, so are Charlie and Rachel. Charlie Texera is in lovely, sunny Hawaii. And so it's the opposite of where I'm at right now. The high today is 37. Yesterday it was like 9. So it's not that in Hawaii. So thank you so much, Charlie. And of course, Rachel Cherney. Rachel is the executive director of BNI Chicago. And of course, she's been a good friend of mine. And we are really excited to have all three of them. They are part of the inaugural committee. So Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you. So you're going to share some slides with us, and you're going to walk us through this manual that we have for the folks today. So thank you.
So what we're going to start out with today is we've just got a couple slides to give our attendees here an overview about who we are, what we're all about, this specific subcommittee of the DEI, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel. And then we want to leave tons of time for questions, best practices. We're not going to get too in the weeds about exactly what's in the manual. We have to tease a little bit so that you guys will check it out. Brooke has gone ahead and set up a Facebook group. So if you guys have been involved with things like Diamond Growth Program, that manual and program, we went ahead and set up a similar Facebook community. So Brooke, if you've got that handy, could you share the link for the people in the chat who would be interested? Or Claudia's got it right there. So just to be able to follow along, a lot of times we get the question, what's next? How do we get involved? A really great way to do so is to join us over on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, you can go ahead and reach out to one of us through BNI Connect, and we'll help you out there. So Claudia already wonderfully gave us an introduction here. And so I'm just going to briefly go over some of this, and then Brooke, I believe we've got you at the ready to talk about some of our terms. So here we all are again. So quick overview about what we're going to be talking about today and what we would love to get your questions, and so we can provide some answers. We're going to talk about some DEI terms. So just giving you very high level some of the terms that you'll encounter in our manual. Also talking about the business case. Why is it good business to focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in your region, in your teams, in your chapters, and with your members? And then specifically what we have come together, Charlie, Brooke, and myself, launch, fill, and retain, or in BNI, what we call 3+1. And then finally, a little bit more information about the manual and a DEI pledge. So I'm going to kick it over to Brooke to talk about the terms diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Awesome. So for our key terms, a lot of times when you're dealing with either BNI, your main job, or even just with the way our culture is set up right now here in America, you probably hear a lot of DEI, D&I, DIB, and you probably have no idea what those acronyms are because there's so many of them. But with DEI, and this will be the same with them, is diversity. So that's the main one. Diversity is all the ways in which people differ. For me, I always like to harp on the fact that diversity is not just race, it is everything. So the LGBTQ plus community, gender, socioeconomic status, someone's able-bodied versus not able-bodied, any kind of disabilities, being on the spectrum, not being on the spectrum. So it is a whole umbrella of different things that can include what diversity is. Then we have the equity piece. Equity is about creating access and opportunity and advancement for different people. So making sure that regardless of what makes someone different, whether in a minority group or a majority group, they have access to the same equal opportunities. And then the last part is the inclusion part. And that is where we are extending to which people feel a sense of belonging and a value within a given setting. And we will have those terms for you along with many others in the manual.
Yeah, these are just the highlights, and something that I absolutely love. So Brian Hilliard, he works a lot with Dr. Meisner, and I've got a couple resources on the following slide, but he talks about that diversity is a fact. It's just a fact. The world that we live in is a diverse place. And Brooke and I have talked extensively about the age diversity, right? Because both Brooke and I've been in BNI for, I joined in 2010, and you know, like how the 90s feels like it was 10 years ago. I'm like, wait, 2010, that means I've been in BNI for 12 years. And I was by far and away the youngest person in my chapter, which is what happened to Brooke as well. And so diversity just is, right? And equity is something that is already built into BNI. Every BNI member, in theory, right, gets the same amount of time each week to do their weekly referral request, their weekly ask. Every BNI member gets opportunities to do their feature presentation. They get a BNI Connect profile. They get access to BNI University. So we already do equity really well, but it's this last piece, inclusion. And this is where we have a huge opportunity as leaders. And I saw Mike Macedonio on the call. He said once, to me, that it is our responsibility to be radically inclusive, leaders. And those of you who are on the call today, that's what you represent, people who are taking steps to be radically inclusive. So to share some of those resources, we're going to be talking about what is our manual, who is it for, and what it isn't. So those are some important things to think about: is what is it not, and who is it for? And why does this matter? So this is really the business case about BNI and why it matters to embrace the diversity that exists around us, use those opportunities that BNI provides, and then be radically inclusive leaders. And so to use a technical term of Ivan's, beware of clumpy networks. And it doesn't matter if it's the network of BNI, your chamber, your parent teacher organization, even a cycling group that you're part of, whatever it is, your religious organization. Networks just tend to be clumpy. People cluster based on education, age, ethnicity, professional status, and branching out is absolutely crucial to your success. And this is sometimes where you have to start with members, is talking about why it's important to break up those clumps in your network. And the only thing that should really matter that you have in common with people in your network is about their passion, what they're really good at what they do. And so if you want to take a quick screenshot, I've got some great references. There are a few podcasts. So if you're an education coordinator, or if you frequently work with education coordinators in chapters, these are 3 really great podcasts that talk about it. One of which I believe is the podcast that Claudia was on, which is number 694, and some articles that Ivan has either authored or co-authored. So there really is a business case for why diversity, equity, and inclusion needs to be a topic of conversation in your region. And then, so this brings us to our manual. What it is a guidebook, a step-by-step way to start these conversations and start the path forward on filling your chapter in a diverse, equitable, and inclusive way, retaining members, creating a sense of belonging, and then creating new opportunities, spreading that BNI message to other communities. What it is not, it's not the be all and end all, right? So we could never sit down and write the absolute definitive manual on everything you need to know to be a diverse, equitable, and inclusive human being on this planet. You are going to need to do some research on your own and really start with where you're at. Each one of us on this call has had a different version and different experience of getting to the place where we feel comfortable having these conversations and being these radically inclusive leaders. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to my wonderful co-panelists, and we're each going to talk a little bit about our section. So we're going to start with Phil.
Aloha, everyone, coming to you from Hawaii. Took a walk this morning and it was chilly here, probably about in the 60s. So it was cold. Just wanted to share that with you all. I wanted to talk about the fill section. And so on this level, at the chapter level, we're talking about, of course, the membership committee, the leadership team, of course, but specifically the growth coordinator. If you can drop in the chat if you chapter, if your chapter does have a growth coordinator, I'd love to see if in fact you do. And then at the regional level, we're either talking about at the executive director level if you're a franchise, or managing director if you're a core. And so, you know, when we've done exercises, I've been in BNI, I'm on the island of Oahu on the North Shore. When we've done inviting exercises, it's mostly been that chart. I don't know if you've seen it. Look through your wallet, look through your checkbook. Who do you currently do business with, and invite those people. And I think that that is still a fine exercise, but we are wishing to expand that beyond what Rachel called our clumps. And so in the DEI manual is a list of national organizations, just to kind of trigger some ideas as to the vast kind of spheres of influence, whether it be African-American organizations, LGBTQ, young professionals, Asian Americans. And so when we are asking our members to invite, we can try to keep in mind some other thinking outside of these specific clumps. So some specific examples. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes it's hard to find people in the trades. We meet at 8:30 in the morning. Sometimes they're busy. It's hard for them to get here. But almost all of our people in the trade so far, specifically, let's say at the general contractor level, have been men. So when we're inviting like plumbers, I just did a research for, there is a Women of United Association of Plumbers. Who knew, right? Maybe there's one in your region and you could reach out to a female plumber. Or I noticed that there's an Asian Pacific Women's Forum. I could join that forum and ask them, is there any general contractor here or any electrician, to try to bring in and expand that sphere of influence. I'm thinking about like financial advisors. You know, the founder of our BNI chapter is a female, and she was one of the youngest people in Hawaii who was certified as a financial planner. So I know financial advisors are like the highly coveted seats, but perhaps we could look to young professional organizations to fill that seat. And then finally, in terms of filling chapters, I think like a regional diversification is pretty important. You think where is your chapter located, like physically? I know we're mostly on Zoom, but where was it located? And are there other neighboring or different regions, like smaller regions, that have a different demographic makeup? And so, for example, our chapter, when I first joined, was predominantly white and Asian. In Hawaii, about 40% of our demographic is Asian, 30% is white, 10% is Native Hawaiian. And in the last 2 years, we've had an influx of Native Hawaiian Polynesians in our group. And it's been really good to kind of deepen those relationships and, of course, network with that group. So first point just for Phil is, if you have other ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments section. Are there different ways to declump and outreach for filling your chapters? And the second final point before I pass it on is, once we actually reach out and invite different members or expanding our membership, to make sure we're being inclusive. And this is the type where you don't know you have blinders on if you have blinders on. And Rachel dropped in the chat some podcasts. Our panelists are working, we are really excited. They're working, I see Charlotte is on the call, some DEI education trainings, which if you join the Facebook group, we will announce when those are live. And some of the topics are exploring unconscious biases, or if you have that conflict that arises from cultural miscommunications, what do you do? And so those are the two that I think I'm looking mostly forward to. I'm just going to give you a quick example of what I mean by unconscious biases and give you my own personal example, because I'm on this panel. I think I know I have blinders on, but even when I know I have blinders on, I still fall into mistakes. And so I have a friend who is disabled. She got in an accident 20 years ago and is an adaptive surfer, meaning she surfs prone, lying down, not standing up. And so I invited her to speak to a different networking group. And I remember just asking, letting her know, like, oh, hey, Anne, you have a really nice smile. And I thought it was just a nice thing to say. And when she did the presentation, she put on her PowerPoint all the things that people have told her that have made her feel less than. And one of the things she wrote on there was people always telling her, you have a nice smile. And I bring this up as an example because, yes, of course, I did not mean to say that. I did not, intentionally mean to offend her, but it was a microaggression in the fact that maybe she's always been commented about her face and not her physical body. And it was a way for me to recalibrate and just kind of adjust my thinking. So to wrap up, there is this list of networking organizations in our manual to help kind of, massage and expand when we do outreach. And then, of course, the inclusivity piece. And we'll announce when the educational podcast will be ready. Thanks.
Yeah, and before we kick it over to Brooke, I think, so Jim, you made two really good points, Jim Bartlett, who's in the chat. To fish in the new ponds, we do have that list of organizations. And if you do have another great organization, please let us know and we'll add it to the list. And the question became, explain why that compliment could become a microaggression. And I think that's a really important point to touch on when we're having these conversations, is that it's really in the eye of the beholder, right? And so the first reaction sometimes, and Charlie, you can hop in here, might be to feel defensive when someone says, hey, that made me feel uncomfortable or whatever that was. And your first thing is knee-jerk to say, well, I didn't mean it that way. Right. And I think that this whole conversation about the blinders and about microaggressions is to take a step back and say that it wasn't your intent, and asking, what would you prefer? Because it's going to be different for everyone. Think about your friends that maybe you can tell certain jokes with and jokes around. And it's all about content and context and about having that conversation. So without her name is Alice, right, in the room, or Anne, without Anne in the room, we can't answer that question about why it was a microaggression unless you specifically ask that person. And that's why this can get tricky and feel hard, but it's important to walk right into the center of that hard conversation and have it, as opposed to just saying, well, that wasn't my intention and you're too sensitive, right? And then we're going to move it on over to Brooke to talk about retain or belonging when it comes to being on a team like a BNI chapter.
Absolutely. So when it comes to retaining members, the analogy that I also used when we talked at the conference, for me, analogies just work better. But it is like bringing your significant other to your family's cookout, and then you go mingle with your cousins and your brother and whoever else, and you just leave them sitting at a table without introducing them to anybody, to not making them feel warm and welcomed. And probably after the family cookout, you and your significant other might have a conversation, and we'll see if you're still together or not. That's kind of how it is with retaining members in your BNI chapter as well. We all know, whether that's a member level or if you are in some form of a leadership position, getting visitors to the room is already hard enough. Getting them to apply and become members are even harder. So why would you want to go through all of that hard work just to lose them because you didn't make them feel like they belong to your chapter? And whether it was intentionally or unintentionally, just didn't make them feel like they belong. For me, being retaining, it's all about being intentional. The same way with the new member, I always preach to my chapter, when a new member joins, you need to reach out to them for a one-to-one. Don't make those new members reach out to you. Same way when it comes to diverse people, get to know them, be intentional. You have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which goes completely against the grain of what the majority of us are like. We don't really like change, right? But that's what it is. For me, in the manual, we talk about educational coordinators, and even the president, or if you're a president, delegates who creates those PowerPoint slides for them, are some very easy, tangible ways to make members feel included. So when it comes to the educational coordinator, and also for the president too. So you notice at the end of every meeting, we have a quote. Every month, America, they lay it out for us. Every month is already labeled. So whether that's Black History Month, Mental Health Awareness Month, LGBTQ Month, I don't think there's a Young People Month, but I'll have to advocate with that with somebody else. But nonetheless, you all get the point. take that calendar and have one of your educational moments be about that. If you don't feel comfortable talking about that subject, be intentional. If you have that person in your group, reach out to them for help. Maybe they wouldn't even mind teaching that educational moment for that particular meeting. For the president or whoever is creating the slides, for your meeting quote. It's not that hard for Black History Month. Put a Black person on there. You will not imagine how far that would go. I'm actually a director consultant here in Cincinnati, and one of my chapters actually had a quote from Maya Angelou, and that really it meant the world to me because I'm so used to not seeing something as simple as a Black person be the quote at the end of the meeting. So those are just some very easy ways to help people feel included and can go a long way to retaining people. Which will help with your chapter growth, right? Because some people are going to leave for various reasons, but we want to retain as many people as we can, which is also going to help us feel. Some people don't want to be the only person in the room. That is a called a token, which is also in the manual, being the only one of whatever background it is. If I walk in and see 2 other Black people or 2 other millennials, that's going to might make me want to put an application in with you versus somewhere else. So retention is a really huge way, and making them feel like they belong will help with that.
All right, fantastic. And bringing up the third part of 3+1. And for any of you who have never heard that phrase, hopefully you have before, the +1 is telling stories, which is a big part of all of this, is telling stories. And if you don't have your own, you're welcome to borrow one of ours. And if you don't know of a good story that illustrates the point you're trying to make, just ask. I'm sure somebody in BNI has it. And the third part is launch, the new opportunities and creating community. What I like to think about with BNI is that BNI chapters are really communities within communities, and our core values, our 7 core values, already lend themselves extremely well to DEI efforts, right? We have givers gain, making a bigger pie, not tinier slices. We have things like lifelong learning, which there's a lot of that great conversation going on in the chat right now. And then it is so important to build relationships in BNI. And if you are on a regional team, if you're a launch director, if you are an executive director, an area director, it is part of our responsibility to get out there and create community within community. So I don't know the exact number off the top of my head as of today, but as of last year, the market penetration. So in BNI, we have all kinds of stats and numbers, and there is something called SME data, small to medium enterprise data. And basically what that is there's a big study that was commissioned by BNI in the United States to determine the number of potential SMEs, small to medium enterprises, that may be part of BNI, so our target market. And there are a lot of them throughout BNI. And BNI is the best kept marketing secret. You may have heard that before, best kept marketing secret. And essentially what that translates to is that only 1.25% of eligible SMEs, eligible BNI members, are BNI members right now. That's crazy. We only have 1.25% market penetration in the United States. That is an absolutely incredible opportunity to bring BNI to more people in more communities. And thinking about through the lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a great way to make sure that your BNI region is representative of the communities that we live and work in. And so one of the things that Brooke, Charlie, and I talked about as we prepared for this presentation, and as we've been working on this manual for quite some time now, is about being actionable. So what you're going to find in this manual, it's not a lot of theory about, race and equity and age diversity and things like that. You're going to find a lot of tactical information. So that's why we encourage you to go get the theoretical stuff somewhere else. You want to be well prepared, but we're going to be talking about tactical things. And so we wanted to have an action item for each of these 3 points. And when you think about launch, it's all about opening up those opportunities. So if you are someone who is responsible for helping to start new chapters in your BNI region, my action item for you is I want you to identify an area in your region that is not like the member makeup of your region, right? So Brooks talked about millennials a couple times, the folks who are 25 to 40 years old. Yes, millennials are in their 40s now. We represent one of the largest portions of the working population. So I want you to find out where the young people go, and I want you to meet the realtor who is the guy or the gal or the person, right? Being inclusive, the person in that area, and have a one-on-one with them. Talk to them about BNI. bring them to a showcase chapter. I want you to go and find a racially diverse area in your region that is not well represented in your chapter, or a religiously diverse area. Go out and find the realtor. That is always my advice. So what we don't do in BNI is we don't plant our flag, right, in different areas where we want to start chapters. We build relationships. We use that core value of building relationships, of lifelong learning, and of giver's gain to really meet the people who are the hubs in the community, show them that BNI is out there, and then help them create a BNI chapter of their own that can then attract people from all over, not just their area, but all over the surrounding area, to continue all that good mixing and breaking up of the clumps in the region. So this is something that we did in Chicago. Chicago is unfortunately very well known for our segregation issues. I feel like only Milwaukee, Wisconsin is worse than Chicago these days. No offense, Milwaukee folks, but that is the reality. I mean, Chicago is so segregated by neighborhood that there are jokes about the train lines cutting different racial and religious demographics. And so that's what we did about 7 years ago. We started a very active campaign to make connections by reaching out to chambers, by finding real estate agents, financial advisors, insurance professionals, and mortgage professionals. They do a lot of advertising. They are very easy to find. Use the area, the geographic area, and then the name of the profession. They're going to be right there in the top advertised paid Google search result for you. Meet that person, tell them what BNI is all about. And if they've got that right giver's gain mentality, they're going to be so excited, and they're going to be shocked that they've never heard of BNI before, right? As a word of mouth organization, we can do so much more. We are less than 2% market penetration of our ideal clients in the United States. We've got a lot of work to do. So thinking about our manual, we do have some frequently asked questions in there that I will share with you, and you will find these as well as the answers to these. And once again, as we've mentioned, we're really focusing on the tactical aspect of this rather than the theoretical aspect. So we've got questions in there like, what value does diverse demographics bring to me as a business? These are things that you can use to talk to your director team and your members if they're wondering, why bother? Why is this important to me? What's the business case? How do we get everyone, including leadership team, on board? So if you are a member here and you're thinking, yeah, my leadership team's not going to be interested in something like this, we do have some best practices and feedback in there for you as well. How do we handle people who believe that we're already diverse? That's something that can come across as a microaggression. And how do I become more aware of my own biases? So important to do the work for yourself and with yourself first so you can answer these questions. Why do we need diversity, equity, and inclusion training? So these are really great questions that you'll want to have a good handle on the answers for as you roll this out. So what's next? Access to this manual. Go ahead, join us on Facebook for some additional updates. We do have, Brooke's got the freshest version 1.0 of our manual available for you in PDF format. So make sure to connect with us, connect with Claudia so you can get access to that. And I do believe, because this is a panel conversation, I will kick it back over to Claudia, stop sharing my screen, and allow for that Q&A panel portion.
All right, thank you so much. Of course, as always, you three are fantastic. For anybody that had access to the national conference last year, we had a series of different diversity topics that were covered, and these three were remarkable in really diving deeper, a little deeper into the manual and what to expect. And so again, you did not disappoint, so we thank you for that. There's a couple of questions in the chat, but before I get to those, what do you see, right? When we talked about this, right? When we put you together as a committee and you said, a manual would be great. What was the reasoning behind that? Why did you see that as something that was valued? This was like the first, this was item number one that you went to work on. So why was this so important to get out?
I will stab at this question for the committee. So a lot of the reason why we did it, especially in today's climate, sometimes talking about diversity can be still a very taboo conversation, right? And that's because we don't want to be uncomfortable. And that's when all that training with checking your unconscious biases and all that really comes into play. But we figured that this manual, which we really should probably call it a guidebook, right? Would be a great way to kind of break down those barriers for people to start having those conversations. That's the only way we're going to really make true progress, is to talk about it. And like Rachel already shared, this is not going to be some high level, training or anything like that on our end that we are going to provide. We do provide recommendations for that in the manual, including our very own training committee, but it's just going to give you some very tangible and tactical ways to start having the conversation and to grow professionally and personally.
All right, fantastic. Thank you, Brooke. You did a great job at that. That wasn't just the staff, that was perfect. Another question, right? So if I am a brand new, someone on a leadership team, and this is really, again, targeting directors, but if I'm even a newer director and don't know, right? A lot of times they're onboarding you, it's like drinking through a fire hose. There's a lot of stuff coming at you, and I don't know that this exists. I guess when would be the right time for this to come into play? So when is the right time for this to come into play for a director? Obviously for something extreme, right? There's like extreme cases. Oh my goodness, we have to handle this. There's a clear overt case of discrimination, right? But for other people, how would they, how do you suggest folks introducing this, like executive directors introducing this to their regions and making sure that people know, even as they come in that are brand new?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take this one. This falls into the what is this not? And I think this also feeds into Dip's question that was dropped in to our Q&A section, is that this manual is not for crisis management. This is not for, we've got a very serious situation going on in a chapter, and that is, talk to your executive director, talk to the BNI support staff if you're on the core. This is not a how to handle a crisis. This manual will really come into play well when you have a healthy chapter or a healthy region, and the question becomes, how do we make it better? How do we make it even better? So it's kind of a good to great situation. A really great time to introduce this to a chapter is when you're talking about Activate or Spring Visitor Days, Member Extravaganza, whatever you call it in your region, and there's a growth initiative going on. So how do we look at the diversity in our community and become more inclusive in our chapter using a growth initiative? So if you've got chapters, and right now in Chicagoland, we have over 30 chapters, and 32 out of 32 chapters have in their goals for 2022 that they want to grow. That is a really great time to start talking about DEI as a path for growth. So that would be my recommendation. This is not for crisis management. This is for a chapter. So it's not, if you've got a chapter, we have a chapter that lovingly thinks of themselves as a little bit of a boys club. They don't like it though. So they're not proud of being a boys club, if you will. They really want to have some of those conversations. So even spending, going to their meeting once a month, I know exactly why women don't join this chapter. I know exactly why. It's some of the jokes they make, some of the comments they make. It's all a harmless, good fun, right? And they're open to having the conversation, and they're open to that kind of coaching. And so that would be the time to use this, rather than somebody's making someone uncomfortable. We have a harassment issue or a racism issue in the chapter. Not time for the 3+1 manual for that. And then so to Dip's question, if a region or a chapter requires some help or education regarding diversity training, what I would recommend, if it's, that very easy softball kind of stuff, check out those 3 podcasts that I linked, or some of Dr. Meisner's information. If it is something above and beyond that, we do have, hopefully on BNI University coming in here soon, some modules that are specific to DEI topics that you can assign to your chapters. And if it's something even more so than that, please reach out to the panel. We have a lot of really highly qualified people who can have those conversations. And I saw Charlie unmute as well.
Yes, go ahead, Charlie.
Adding to what Rachel said, there is actually also a section in the manual devoted to a specific position that we've termed community liaison position. And we envision this position of one person who is solely responsible for being familiar with the manual and introducing parts of it to the leadership team, whether it be at the regional level or at the director ambassador level, whatever level you want. But it could be once a month if you have meetings with your directors, or once a quarter. But that person would be at that meeting rolling out some of this, the manual.
Yeah, and a big reason why this opportunity was afforded to us today to talk to you about the 3+1 manual, the timing, this January timing was very deliberate. One, it's the beginning of a new year and you have chapters thinking about how they can continue to improve upon your chapters. And the other reason is that this is the time of the year where area directors, executive directors, and regional director teams are starting to talk about mid-year leadership training that usually happens in March. I highly encourage you, if this is something that you are interested in rolling out into your region or into your chapters, to incorporate parts of the 3+1 manual into that mid-year leadership team summit or leadership team training. That's going to be the easiest way to get this information out there. And once again, not during a crisis, but during a time when we're thinking about how can we keep progressing and providing that more inclusive, more equitable, more valuable opportunity for our members and our communities.
Yes, this is perfect. Yeah, so it sounds like basically, Rachel, that this is an opportunity. The manual is really more for proactiveness as opposed to reactive. And so that is something, because I know a lot of times people panic on the fly, something comes up, and it's never good to respond with panic, and yet it happens. So definitely, if you have this at your disposal, it's much easier, and you really start to understand it. It will make sense to have it be available, and really using this within your regions and your areas as well. So Jim had mentioned, yes, Jim. So I'm going to drop my email. I mean, I know Jim has my email, but other folks who need my email, claudiathompson@bni.com. If you have any questions about distribution, please feel free to reach out, and I will make sure that we get the manual out to you. But it's been ready. It's been hot off the presses for a while. So we are been really excited to share this with all of you. Thank you, Jim. Jim said it on speed dial for those that are watching this, that he has me on speed dial, and that might be true. But yeah, so make sure that you take the time to look at this, even on whatever level that you are within the organization. It's really valuable, and you might even be able to have some of these for those of you that are not full-time BNI. This might be helpful, even some of the tools. It really is a remarkable manual within your own businesses and the way that you interact with people professionally as well. So definitely take the time for that. Did we have any other questions? Okay, they're jumping out of, let me say that we answered these. I think we answered for Jeff as well.
Cease in LA asked, will the manual be available on BNI Business Builder? That is the intention. It's a little bit more complicated to get new sections added to Business Builder than we initially anticipated. So we would love for there to be a DEI tab in the future where you can find all of our training that we've put together with the training team, this manual, and many other things. I know Claudia's done podcasts. Some of us have done presentations at the All In, weekly meetings, conferences, international, national, and we would love to have all of that in one place. For now, we are keeping that all together in our Facebook group. So once again, you can join us there if you're a Facebook user. If not, please reach out and we will gladly get you all that material.
I must say, I'll jump in. So the manual will be emailed. So when we actually spoke in the conference, which is hard to believe that was almost a year ago, we have a listserv of people who already requested access to the mail. I'm sure some of those people hopefully are here on this talk with us, and probably others did not make it. So if you want to drop your email in the chat, just in case you didn't, we can get you that way. So we will be emailing it out, and it also will be housed on our Facebook group. With our Facebook group, we do plan on having roundtables. We don't want to just give you a manual and say, hey, here, take this and run with it, right? You kind of want some extra instructions. So we plan on having roundtables so that as a group, we can go over best practices. People can share what's been working for them, maybe piggyback off of others. So that Facebook group will house the manual, and then we will also have roundtable discussions as well to cover different sections.
And we're going to need all of your help, right? This is going to be a grassroots effort. So I did mention Diamond Growth Program before, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with. We're really kind of taking a page out of their playbook, having this Facebook group, having conversations with each other, and then really building that up, sharing best practices, refining. Our manual is very much version 1.0, and we look forward to 2.0 and 3.0 and so on and so forth until it is just a regular part. It's something new chapters are trained on. It's something that happens during fall leadership summits and spring leadership training. And that's really our intention, is that it starts with a small group of us realizing that this is important and this is part of our responsibility as leaders, right? Diversity exists. It's already out there. Equity is built into BNI, and being inclusive is our responsibility as leaders.
Fantastic. Yes. So I saw people, Brooke went and I was getting, if you heard the pings, it was people emailing me like, please get the manual, just please.
I must say I had to. That's all we were getting
that's-
from the beginning. So kind of had to rip the Band-Aid off.
That's okay. That's okay. So if you could, folks, put your questions in the Q&A, but I have them, leave the ones here that you have. So I see here, so I don't want to miss any. So it looks like, is anyone on the DEI panel willing to visit and do an 8-minute presentation to give a briefing on this? That would be me, Jody. So if you want to send me an email and make the request, I can then get back to you and we can have a conversation. Also, what else? Yeah, and I put it up there too. So Charlie put it in again, the Facebook group link. Beth, it's worth thinking about, is this a question or just a topic? Oh, so making it strategic, the document independent of its label. That's a whole other, we would like, we'd like that, but I'm not sure if we're able to do that. Let's see what else. So is there any other questions? No. Okay. So yes, so I am excited. I'll give it a final last ditch effort. And I'm glad to hear about Young Professionals Week. Us fake millennials and the real millennials are excited about that coming up. I'm actually an extennial, so I'm trying to hold on. I'm trying to be down with the millennials. Brooke is rolling her eyes. I'm an extennial. It is a term. Thank you. And it is a mix of Gen X and millennials. So I try to squeeze myself in with the millennials, but I know that it's not true. All right. Any other final questions or comments or thoughts? If not, thank you all so much. Thank you, Rachel, Charlie, Brooke, for being on, being amazing, putting this together. And everyone, I tell you, get it. Even if nothing else, the glossary is fantastic. The glossary of terms is fantastic. If you don't know, of course you can Google things, but we really have laid out everything for you. A lot of the terms and a lot of really quick hits so that you can understand what it is. It is really, really valuable. So if nothing else, get the manual for that. But it is fantastic. It's very simple. Like she said, 1.0, but it is very helpful. So thank you all for your time. We really appreciate you. Thank you everyone who came today live and who are watching. Thank you so much. Next month, we have a fantastic DEI talk, another one, second Wednesday of the month, 3 p.m. Eastern. It is Black History Month. One of our guests, and we may have some other folks, but we have Shaliver Sproster, who is the new HR manager for BNI in the US. So we are really excited to have him come on, and he's going to share. He is, I think, of Guyanese background. So him and I bond over the Caribbean background, but he's going to talk a little bit about some hiring efforts and just, of course, being Black in a business space and, of course, throughout BNI. And so we may have 1 or 2 other folks joining us as well. So please join us for that. I'm not sure if we have that in the link in the chat, but you can definitely check on your events calendar for that link. And for now, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next month. Bye, everyone.